What happens when the perfect life is built on a perfect lie? For Chloe Thorne, her world was a fairy tale. A loving millionaire husband, Marcus, a stunning Georgetown townhouse, and their first child on the way. She had everything a woman could dream of, until one rainy Tuesday afternoon. A single photograph, a fleeting glimpse into a 5-star restaurant, shattered the illusion forever. It showed her devoted husband Marcus deep in conversation with the supermodel Isabella Rossi, his hand intimately placed on hers. That night, Chloe vanished. The only thing she left behind was her wedding ring on the pillow and a 3-line note that would ignite a firestorm of secrets, lies, and betrayal, proving that the most devastating truths are the ones hidden in plain sight. Chloe Thorne believed in the architecture of happiness. She believed you could build it brick by loving brick. Her life with Marcus was her grand design, a masterpiece of modern romance. Their home, a 4-story brick townhouse in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., was filled with light art and the quiet hum of success. Marcus, the charismatic CEO of Aura Innovations, a tech firm on the bleeding edge of augmented reality, was the sun around which her world orbited. He was brilliant driven, and she believed utterly devoted to her. At 7 months pregnant, Chloe felt a profound sense of contentment. The baby, a girl they planned to name Olivia, was a flutter of constant reassurance beneath her heart. She spent her days preparing the nursery, a room painted in the soft shade of a morning sky, and consulting on acquisitions for the Smithsonian, a passion she'd cultivated long before she became Mrs. Thorne. The first crack in the foundation appeared on a Tuesday. It was subtle, a hairline fracture you could easily ignore. Marcus called to say he was stuck in a last-minute board meeting. "It's this new merger with Omnicorp, darling," he'd said, his voice a familiar, convincing baritone over the phone. "It's a monster. I'll be late. Don't wait up." Chloe understood. She was proud of his ambition. She made herself a chamomile tea and curled up on the sofa with a book on Renaissance art. But a text from her friend Samantha sent a jolt through her cozy evening. It was a picture snapped discreetly from a nearby table at Le Ciel, one of DC's most exclusive and romantic restaurants. The photo was slightly blurry, but the subjects were unmistakable. There was Marcus. He wasn't in a boardroom. He was leaning across a table, his expression intense, and focused, his hand covering the delicate, manicured hand of another woman. And the woman... Chloe's breath caught in her throat. It was Isabella Rossi, a supermodel whose face graced billboards from New York to Milan, a woman known for her ethereal beauty and a string of high-profile relationships. They weren't just talking. The air between them was charged, intimate. The way he was looking at her was a look Chloe hadn't seen directed her way in months. It was a look of hunger, of conquest. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The sound was deafening in the silent house. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in her chest. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a betrayal. Every late night, every unexplained business trip, every distracted kiss suddenly rearranged itself into a horrifying new pattern. The architecture of her happiness was a house of cards, and a single gust of truth had brought it all down. She sat there for hours, the tea growing cold beside her, as the rain lashed against the windows. She didn't cry. The shock was too profound, a frozen knot of pain where her heart should be. She thought of the baby, her daughter, and a different feeling began to surface through the ice, a fierce, protective fire. She would not bring a child into a broken home built on deceit. She would not be the weeping, forgiving wife. When she heard Marcus's key in the lock just after midnight, she didn't move. He walked in, shrugging off his expensive coat, a perfect picture of the tired, hard-working husband. What a day, he sighed, loosening his tie. I'm exhausted. How are my two favorite girls? He leaned in to kiss her, but Chloe turned her head slightly, and his lips brushed her cheek. He paused, sensing the chill. Everything okay, honey? Chloe looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any flicker of guilt, any sign of the man in the photograph. She found none. He was a perfect stranger. Just tired, she said, her voice a monotone she didn't recognize. Long day. Get some rest, he said, patting her swollen belly. We've got the final OB/GYN appointment before the big show on Thursday. He smiled, oblivious, and in that moment Chloe made her decision. She wouldn't confront him. She wouldn't scream or throw things. That was the scene he would expect, the one he was prepared to manage to lie his way out of. No. She would simply disappear. She would take his most precious asset, his legacy, his unborn child, and vanish so completely it would be as if she never existed. His perfect life was about to become his perfect hell. The next 36 hours were a masterclass in controlled desperation. Chloe operated with a clarity that frightened her. The grief was a constant roaring ocean in the background, but in the forefront of her mind was a single, crystalline, objective escape. While Marcus slept, she moved through their home like a ghost. First, she went to his study. She knew the passcode to his personal safe her birthday. Inside, amongst stock certificates and property deeds, was an envelope of emergency cash. $50,000. He'd told her it was for a worst-case scenario. The irony was a bitter pill. She took it all. Next, she used her laptop, clearing the history afterward, to book 3 separate decoy bus tickets under false names to different cities, one to Miami, one to Chicago, one to Seattle. She knew Marcus would hire the best investigators money could buy, and their first move would be to check travel records. This was digital chaff meant to send them scrambling in the wrong directions. Her actual plan was simpler and far more analog. She packed a single nondescript duffel bag, a few changes of practical clothes, prenatal vitamins, a copy of her medical records she'd quietly requested weeks ago under the guise of switching doctors, and the burner phone she'd bought for cash at a 7-Eleven a month prior. That was the day the first real suspicion had taken root after Marcus had come home, smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers. Chanel No. 5. Isabella's signature scent. She had hoped she was wrong, that she was just being an overly emotional pregnant woman. Now she was glad for her paranoia. The final, most painful act was in their bedroom. She slipped her platinum wedding band and the breathtaking 5-carat diamond engagement ring from her finger. The skin underneath was pale indented, a ghost of a promise. She placed them on Marcus's pillow, right where his head should be. Beside them, she left a simple, folded note written in her elegant script. It said, "I saw the picture. I know about Le Ciel. Don't look for me. I won't be found." She took one last look around the life she had built. The nursery door was slightly ajar, the moonlight illuminating the empty crib. A wave of nausea and sorrow so profound it nearly buckled her knees, washed over her. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering, "It's just you and me now, little one. I'll keep you safe." Then she walked out the front door, melting into the pre-dawn darkness of Georgetown, and never looked back. Marcus Thorne woke up to the silence. It was unusual. Chloe was always up before him, the scent of coffee already filling the house. He rolled over his hand, reaching for her side of the bed, and found it cold. Then his fingers brushed against the rings. He sat bolt upright, his heart kicking into a frantic rhythm. He saw the note. As he read the 2 short lines, the blood drained from his face. Le ciel. How, who? It didn't matter. The carefully constructed wall between his 2 worlds had been obliterated. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He scrambled out of bed, calling her name. Chloe. Chloe, this is a misunderstanding. He ran through the house, his voice echoing in the empty rooms. Her closet was full, her car was in the garage, but her phone, her wallet, her entire presence was gone. The nursery was the final stop. The sight of the empty crib waiting for a baby that was no longer there sent a spear of genuine terror through him. This wasn't just an angry wife leaving for a few days. This was calculated. This was an eradication. His first call wasn't to the police. It was to Gavin Price, a former FBI agent who now ran the most discreet and ruthless private security firm in the DC area. Price was a fixer, a man who made problems disappear for the city's elite. Gavin, it's Marcus Thorne. I have a situation. A big one. His voice was strained, tight, with a fear he hadn't felt since his company was on the verge of bankruptcy years ago. My wife is gone. Gone, as in, she's left you, or gone as in missing. Gavin's voice was gravelly devoid of emotion. She left a note. She thinks she found out about something. Marcus couldn't bring himself to say Isabella's name. She's 7 months pregnant, Gavin. 7 months. Find her. I don't care what it costs. No police, not yet. This stays quiet. My company is about to close the Omnicorp merger. Any public scandal, any hint of this could crater the entire deal. Find her. Hanging up, Marcus paced his study like a caged animal. His fear for Chloe and the baby was real, a raw, gnawing ache. But tangled within it was a cold, selfish terror for himself. His reputation, his billion-dollar merger, the empire he had built from nothing. It was all tied to the image of Marcus Thorne, the stable, brilliant family man. A pregnant wife on the run was a PR nightmare that could cost him everything. He had to get her back. He had to fix this. He would apologize, beg buy her a new jewelry collection, a new house, whatever it took. He just needed to find her first. He underestimated Chloe. He thought he was dealing with a wounded heart. He had no idea he was dealing with a brilliant mind, one that knew all his secrets and was now using his own ruthless playbook against him. Chloe knew the first 48 hours were critical. She hailed a cab 2 blocks from her house and paid cash to be dropped at Union Station. Inside, she moved with the anonymous mourning crowd, her pregnant belly hidden under a loose-fitting coat, a simple beanie pulled low over her hair. She didn't board a train. Instead, she exited through a side entrance, walked another 6 blocks, and hailed a second cab. This time, to a grimy, cash-only motel in a forgotten corner of Arlington, Virginia. She paid for a week in advance under the name Jane Smith. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair, a universe away from her Egyptian cotton sheets and custom-milled soaps. It was perfect. Once inside, she powered on the burner phone and made her first and only call. "Frank, it's me. I'm out." The voice on the other end was gruff-weathered. "Good. You okay, kid?" "I'll survive," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you set it up?" "The cottage is ready. Quiet place in rural Pennsylvania. Paid for 6 months in advance. The landlord thinks you're a writer on a deadline. The car is in the long-term lot at Dulles, under the name you gave me. keys in the magnetic box under the driver's side fender. Frank Miller was a retired cop turned private investigator. Chloe had hired him a month ago, the day she found the Chanel receipt. While Marcus was wooing his mistress, Chloe had been quietly using her own considerable trust fund left to her by her grandmother to have her husband investigated. Frank had been feeding her a steady stream of information, hotel bills, dinner reservations, wire transfers to a holding company that owned the lease on a luxury condo in Soho, Isabella Rossi's condo. The picture from Le Ciel was just the final damning confirmation. "The second package?" Chloe asked. "Delivered to the P.O. box this morning," Frank confirmed. "It's everything you asked for. Copies of Thorne's offshore account statements, the pre-merger asset transfers, the works. It's dirty, Chloe. Dirtier than you thought." "I know," she whispered. "Thank you, Frank, for everything. Just stay safe, kid. He's going to turn over heaven and earth to find you." He was right. Gavin Price and his team descended on the Thorne residence like a SEAL team. They were discreet, efficient, and technologically terrifying. They swept the house for bugs, cloned hard drives, and began building a digital profile of Chloe that was more detailed than her own memory. "She's smart," Gavin told Marcus after 12 hours of intense work. He was a compact, impeccably dressed man in his 50s with cold, intelligent eyes. "She booked 3 bus tickets out of Union Station to throw us off. Miami, Chicago, Seattle. All paid with a prepaid credit card bought for cash a week ago. But there's no surveillance footage of her boarding any of them." "So where is she?" Marcus demanded, his patience worn to a thread. "She's gone to ground," Gavin said, pulling up a map on a tablet. "She used cash. She's likely in a motel somewhere close, waiting for the initial heat to die down before she makes her real move. We're pulling ATM and traffic cam footage in a 50-mile radius, but it's like looking for a needle in a haystack made of other needles." Gavin's team also flagged a series of payments from Chloe's personal trust fund over the past month. Significant sums paid to an entity called Miller Investigations. "Frank Miller," Gavin said, his tone sharpening with professional respect. "Old-school PI, ex-MPD homicide. As straight as they come and twice as stubborn. She didn't just run Marcus. She was planning. She hired her own investigator weeks ago." The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't an emotional, impulsive act. This was a premeditated, strategic withdrawal. She had been investigating him. While he was lying to her face, she had been gathering intelligence. A cold fear, deeper than any he'd felt before, began to settle in. What else did she know? His thoughts were interrupted by a call. It was Isabella. "Marcus, darling," she purred, her voice a silken caress. "I haven't heard from you. Is everything all right? You seemed so tense last night." Marcus squeezed the bridge of his nose, a headache pounding behind his eyes. "Now isn't a good time, Isabella." "Don't be like that," she said, a playful pout in her voice. "I was just thinking about our future. Once your situation is resolved, I found the most perfect villa in Tuscany." Her casual dismissal of Chloe as a situation sent a flash of white-hot anger through him. This woman, for whom he had risked everything, was talking about real estate while his pregnant wife was missing. For the first time, he saw a crack in her perfect, beautiful facade. He saw the cold, calculating ambition beneath. "I have to go," he said abruptly, and hung up before she could reply. He turned back to Gavin. "Find this Frank Miller. Find out what he gave her. And find my wife. Double your fee. Triple it. I don't care. Just bring her home." But Chloe wasn't waiting to be found. Under the cover of darkness, She left the Arlington motel, took a series of cabs to Dulles International Airport, and located the 10-year-old Ford Taurus Frank had left for her. It was a world away from her usual Tesla, but it was blessedly anonymous. As she merged onto the highway, heading north into the vast, dark expanse of the American landscape, she felt a terrifying, exhilarating sense of freedom. She was no longer Chloe Thorne, the millionaire's wife. She was a ghost in the system, a mother protecting her child, and she was just beginning to fight back. While Chloe established a quiet, Spartan existence in a secluded Pennsylvania cottage, Marcus's world was contracting into a pressure cooker of his own making. The Omnicorp merger was in its final delicate stages, and the CEO, a shrewd, old-money titan named Robert Kensington, had requested a dinner, a get-to-know-the-family affair at the Chevy Chase Club. Kensington is big on family values, Marcus explained to Isabella over the phone, the desperation in his voice barely concealed. He wants to meet Chloe. I told him she was out of town visiting a sick aunt. I need you to step in. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Isabella's voice was sharp, laced with something that sounded like triumph. No, of course not. Just be my partner for the evening. We'll say we're recently engaged after a quiet separation. It's messy, but it's better than me showing up alone after waxing poetic about my stable home life for the past 6 months. Isabella agreed, perhaps a little too eagerly. The dinner was a disaster. Isabella, dressed in a daring red dress that was entirely inappropriate for the conservative club, dominated the conversation. She spoke of her runway shows in Paris, her celebrity friends, her disdain for the quaintness of DC politics. She corrected Marcus on a story about his own company's founding, and casually mentioned her desire to move Aura's headquarters to a more vibrant city like Los Angeles. Marcus watched Robert Kensington's smile grow tighter, his posture stiffer. He saw the deal, the culmination of 2 years of work, slipping through his fingers. He was looking at Isabella, truly looking at her, and seeing the woman his investigator was uncovering. Gavin Price's report had landed on his desk that morning, and it was chilling. Isabella Rossi wasn't just a model. She was a predator who specialized in wealthy, powerful men. Her last 2 relationships had ended with her receiving significant parting gifts, a condo in Miami, a controlling interest in a small fashion label. She had a history of leaking damaging information about her ex-lovers to tabloid reporters when settlements weren't to her liking. "She's not in love with you, Marcus," Gavin had said bluntly. "She's in love with your stock portfolio, and she's been sloppy." We tracked a series of encrypted emails between her and a notorious short seller, a guy named Alistair Finch. It looks like they're planning to short Aura's stock right before the merger is announced, then leak a story about your marital troubles to tank the price. She's not just your mistress. She's setting you up for corporate sabotage. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her constant questions about the merger's finances, her accidental meetings with board members, her insistence on being seen with him in public, it was all part of a plan. Le Ciel hadn't been a random romantic dinner. It had been a calculated move to be seen to create the very evidence that had driven Chloe away. After the disastrous dinner, Marcus confronted her in the car. "What was that in there, Isabella?" "You were practically planning the company's funeral." "I was just being honest, darling," she said, examining her nails. "Aura needs a fresh perspective. Your perspective is stale." "And what about your emails with Alistair Finch?" Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. Isabella froze. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," he snarled, the full force of his anger finally unleashed. Gavin Price has everything. The encrypted messages, the offshore account you set up in the Caymans. You are going to ruin me." Her composure shattered. The sophisticated model was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "You deserved it. You string me along for a year, hiding me like some dirty secret, promising you'll leave your boring little wife. A man like you should have a woman like me on his arm, not some curator." I was taking what I was owed. Marcus stared at her, the delusion and the venom in her words washing over him. He had blown up his life, lost his wife and child for this, for a cheap transactional grifter in a designer dress. The self-loathing was a physical choking sensation. "Get out." He said the words, barely a whisper. "What? Get out of my car, now." He pulled over on a dark, tree-lined street. She stared at him incredulous, then her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Marcus. I'll go to every newspaper, every blog. By the time I'm done, Marcus Thorne will be a synonym for laughing stock." She got out and slammed the door. Marcus drove away, not looking back, the sound of her shouting curses fading behind him. He had put out one fire, but he knew the real inferno was still coming, because far away in her quiet cottage, Chloe was reading a very different report from her own investigator. It wasn't about mistresses or stock tips. It was about a shell corporation in Panama illegal asset transfers designed to devalue Aura Innovations before the Omnicorp merger, and a pattern of financial fraud that could not only kill the deal, but send him to prison. She wasn't just hiding. She was building a case. And she was about to become the prosecution judge and jury of his entire life. The first tremor hit the following Monday. An anonymous, highly detailed article appeared on The Gilded Leash, a niche but influential financial blog run by a muckraking journalist named Brenda Hart. The post titled was "Rot at the Core of Aura Innovations," laid out a series of damning allegations about pre-merger asset stripping, citing offshore accounts and shell corporations with a precision that suggested an insider source. It didn't mention Marcus by name, but it didn't have to. The stock, which had been soaring in anticipation of the merger, dipped 12 points in the first hour of trading. Marcus was in his office, a veritable war room, with his lawyers and Gavin Price. His phone was vibrating non-stop with calls from his board of directors and a panicked Robert Kensington. "It's her," Marcus said, his voice flat. "This has to be her. That PI Frank Miller must have dug all this up for her." "The journalist Brenda Hart is a ghost," Gavin reported, scrolling through a screen of data. "Works entirely through encrypted channels. No one knows her real identity. Whoever the source is, they're smart and they're covering their tracks." The article was just the opening salvo. A few days later, a second piece dropped. This one was more personal. It detailed the lavish spending on a Soho condo and a new Porsche, all traced back to a holding company funded by Marcus and linked the properties to Isabella Rossi. It painted a sordid picture of corporate funds being used to finance a lavish affair. The board of directors summoned Marcus to an emergency meeting. The air in the room was thick with accusation and fear. "What the hell is going on, Marcus?" demanded Lawrence Childs, the oldest board member and a one-time mentor. "Our stock is in free fall. The SEC has started sniffing around. And now I'm reading about your personal indiscretions on financial blogs. Robert Kensington is about to pull the plug on the whole deal." "It's a smear campaign," Marcus insisted, his voice sounding weak, even to his own ears. "A fabrication by a disgruntled party." "Is it a fabrication that your pregnant wife has been missing for over 2 weeks?" Childs shot back. The question hung in the air, cold and sharp. The secret was out. The whispers had become a roar. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, Chloe watched the fallout from her quiet sanctuary. She felt a grim satisfaction, but no joy. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was for every lie he had told, every time he had kissed her, while smelling of another woman's perfume. Frank had uncovered a level of criminality she had never suspected. Marcus wasn't just an adulterer. He was a crook willing to defraud his own shareholders and Robert Kensington to enrich himself. Her life had found a new quiet rhythm. Morning walks through the woods, the air crisp and clean. Simple meals. Reading for hours in front of the stone fireplace. She had regular check-ins with a local midwife in a nearby town, using her new identity, Catherine Kate Miller. Frank had created a flawless backstory for her, but the solitude was a double-edged sword. At night, the fear would creep in. Could Marcus find her? What would he do if he did? She would lie awake, one hand on her belly, feeling the powerful kicks of her daughter, and vow to protect her. The pressure on Marcus was becoming unbearable. He was a man besieged. Isabella, true to her word, had begun talking to the tabloid press, painting herself as the heartbroken victim, spinning a tale of a man who had promised her the world. Her story, combined with the financial scandal and Chloe's disappearance, created a perfect storm. Millionaire mogul's empire crumbles amidst scandal, screamed one headline. Desperate Marcus did the one thing he had been avoiding. He held a press conference. Standing before a wall of cameras, his face pale and drawn, he looked like a shadow of his former self. "I know there have been many rumors," he began, his voice strained. "My company is facing a coordinated attack, and my family is going through a private and painful time. My wife, Chloe, I love her more than anything. Chloe, if you're watching this, please come home. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Please just let me know you and our baby are safe." In her cottage, Chloe watched the broadcast on her laptop, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. His public plea was a performance, another calculated move to regain control of the narrative, to paint her as an unstable emotional runaway. He didn't love her. He loved the idea of her, the stability. She provided the perfect accessory to his perfect life. She picked up the burner phone. It was time for the final move. "Frank," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's time. Send the complete file to Robert Kensington, and send a copy to the U.S. Attorney's office." She was done whispering. It was time for the thunder. The complete file, the crown jewels, as Frank called it, was an explosive device. It contained irrefutable proof of wire fraud, insider trading, and a conspiracy to defraud Omnicorp. The copies of Marcus's personal emails, which Frank had legally obtained through a subpoena related to a fabricated civil suit, were particularly damning, detailing the entire scheme in Marcus's own arrogant words. Robert Kensington received the package via courier at his private estate in Virginia. An hour later, he formally and publicly withdrew the Omnicorp merger offer, citing a catastrophic failure of due diligence and a complete loss of faith in the leadership of Aura Innovations. The next day, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York announced a full-scale federal investigation into Marcus Thorne and his company. Aura's stock didn't just fall, it plummeted off a cliff. The empire was officially burning. But amidst the chaos, Gavin Price finally got a break. One of his digital forensics experts, chasing a ghost of a digital breadcrumb, found a single, heavily anonymized IP address ping from a remote cell tower in rural Pennsylvania. It had been used once for less than a minute to access Chloe's old email account, likely a sentimental moment of weakness. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Gavin cross-referenced the signal location with property rentals, tax records, anything he could find. He finally landed on a secluded lake cottage rented 6 weeks ago for cash by a woman named Catherine Miller. The photo on the fake driver's license Frank had procured was good, but Gavin's facial recognition software was better. It was a 98.7% match for Chloe Thorne. Marcus received the call as he was leaving his lawyer's office, the word indictment still ringing in his ears. "I've found her," Gavin said. "A cottage on Lake Wallenpaupack, Pennsylvania. I'm sending you the address now." Every instinct told Marcus to send the lawyers to send Gavin to handle this through intermediaries. But this was beyond that. This was primal. He needed to see her to understand. He got in his car and drove a 6-hour straight shot north, his mind a maelstrom of rage, regret, and a sliver of something he couldn't name. He arrived as dusk was settling the sky, a blaze of orange and purple over the still lake. The cottage was small, rustic, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. He saw her through the window sitting in a rocking chair, a book in her lap, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of a lamp. She was even more pregnant than he remembered, her belly round and full. She looked peaceful. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of fury and loss through him. He walked to the door and knocked. Chloe wasn't surprised. She had known on some level that this day would come. She had seen the unfamiliar car pull up the long gravel driveway. She stood slowly, her hand resting on her belly, and opened the door. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his eyes were sunken, and his expensive suit was rumpled. The titan of industry was gone, replaced by a haunted, broken man. "Chloe," he breathed, his voice raw. "Marcus." She replied, her voice calm, devoid of the emotion he expected. There was no fear, no anger, just a profound, weary stillness. "Why?" he asked, the single word encompassing everything. "Why destroy me? Why not just divorce me, take half and walk away? Because you didn't just break a promise to me," she said, her gaze unwavering. "You broke the law. You defrauded people who trusted you. You built our entire life on a foundation of lies, not just personal, but professional. This wasn't about money. I never wanted your money. This was about consequences." "I loved you," he said, and it sounded like a plea. "No," Chloe corrected him gently. "You loved that I was predictable, that I was a stable asset in your portfolio. You have no idea what love is, Marcus. Love is honesty. Love is respect. Love is not letting the person you've sworn your life to find out about your affair from a friend's text message." He flinched as if struck. "Isabella." She meant nothing. It was a mistake, a stupid, colossal mistake. "She was a symptom, not the disease," Chloe said. "The disease is your ambition, your greed. It consumes everything it touches. Me, our baby, your company, everything." As she spoke, a sharp, sudden pain radiated through her lower back. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Marcus's eyes widened in alarm. "What is it? What's wrong?" "The baby," she breathed, leaning against the doorframe as another contraction, stronger this time, seized her. "It's coming." The irony was staggering. Here at the final reckoning with the ruins of their life between them, Their daughter had decided to enter the world. The man who had torn her world apart was the only person for miles who could help her. The world for Marcus Thorne had always been a series of calculated risks and manageable outcomes. It was a chessboard where he was the grand master, always 3 moves ahead. But as Chloe gasped her face, a mask of pain, and leaned against the doorframe of her rustic hideout, the board was violently swept from the table. There were no calculations, no strategies, no leverage to be applied. There was only the raw, terrifying biological imperative unfolding before him. The life he had systematically destroyed was now quite literally forcing a new one into existence, and he was the only one there to witness it. Panic, cold and absolute, was a foreign sensation. He moved his limbs, feeling disconnected from his brain. "Okay, okay," he heard himself saying, the words sounding hollow and useless. He guided her away from the door, his hands hovering uncertainly around her, afraid to touch her, afraid not to. "The hospital. Where's the hospital?" "On the table." Chloe managed to get out between gritted teeth. Her eyes squeezed shut. "My bag. Keys." The drive was a frantic, surreal blur. He bundled her into the passenger seat of his pristine Audi, the luxurious leather, a shocking contrast to the unfolding human drama. He fumbled with her pre-packed hospital bag, found the address she'd scribbled on a notepad, and punched it into his car's navigation system. Scranton Regional Medical Center. 23 miles. It might as well have been on the moon. He drove with a speed that bordered on reckless, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The smooth hum of the German engine was punctuated by Chloe's sharp, rhythmic breaths. With every pained gasp from the seat beside him, a piece of his carefully constructed reality flaked away. The pending federal indictment, the billions in shareholder value, he'd incinerated the public humiliation orchestrated by Isabella. It all faded into a dull, insignificant background roar. The only thing that was real was the twisting, winding Pennsylvania country road, the sterile voice of the GPS lady, counting down the miles, and the powerful elemental force of a life demanding its entrance into the world. He glanced over at Chloe. Her head was thrown back against the headrest, her hair damp with sweat. Her face, usually a study in calm composure, was contorted with an effort he couldn't begin to comprehend. He had seen her command boardrooms, charm philanthropists, and navigate the treacherous social waters of Washington, D.C., with effortless grace. He had never seen her this vulnerable, this powerful. This was a strength beyond money or influence. It was ancient and absolute, and he was nothing more than a chauffeur in its presence. "Just breathe," he found himself whispering, echoing the useless advice he'd heard in movies. She shot him a look of such pure, unadulterated fury that he physically recoiled. "Don't you dare tell me to breathe," she snarled, a wave of pain cresting. And then, as the contraction subsided, her body went limp, her voice softening to a whisper. "Just drive." He pressed the accelerator, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was his fault, all of it. The stress, the flight, the hiding, he had done this to her. He had taken her serene, happy pregnancy and turned it into a desperate, fugitive ordeal. If anything happened to her, or to the baby, the thought was a black hole that threatened to swallow him whole. For the first time, Marcus Thorne, the master of the universe, began to pray. He didn't know who he was praying to, but he prayed with the desperate fervor of a man who had finally realized he was not and had never been in control. The emergency room of Scranton Regional was a cacophony of organized chaos, a world away from the hushed private wings of the Sibley Memorial Hospital, where Olivia's birth was supposed to have taken place. A stern-faced triage nurse with a formidable demeanor took one look at Chloe and immediately barked orders, snapping Marcus out of his daze. Within minutes, Chloe was in a wheelchair, being whisked away towards the maternity ward. Marcus followed dumbly in her wake, still clutching her hospital bag. A different nurse, a kind-eyed woman named Mary, stopped him at the double doors. "Family only beyond this point," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You can wait in the lounge. We'll come and get you when there's news." "I'm the father," Marcus said, the words feeling foreign and undeserved on his tongue. The nurse's eyes flickered with skepticism as she took in his expensive but rumpled suit, his unshaven jaw, and the frantic, haunted look in his eyes. He didn't look like an expectant father. He looked like a man who had just crawled from a wreckage. From down the hall, Chloe's voice cut through the air. "Let him in, Mary." Her voice was strained, but it held an unmistakable note of command. Mary's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she nodded. "All right then, gown up." The delivery room was small, sterile, and filled with the intimidating gleam of medical equipment. It smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. The next 8 hours were a crucible. Marcus was a ghost in the room, a silent witness to a battle he had no part in fighting. He watched as Chloe's exhaustion gave way to a superhuman endurance. He saw the doctors and nurses work around her with a calm, practiced efficiency. He fetched ice chips. He held a cool cloth to her forehead. When she screamed in agony, squeezing his hand with a strength that threatened to shatter his bones, he didn't flinch. He just held on, anchoring her, offering the only thing he had left to give his presence. In this crucible, his self-delusion was burned away. He saw with horrifying clarity the 2 women he had tethered his life to. Isabella, with her manufactured dramas, her calculated tantrums, her beauty that was as deep as a photograph, and Chloe. Chloe, who was currently performing a feat of such raw, primal courage, it dwarfed every boardroom conquest he had ever celebrated. He had traded a mountain for a molehill, a diamond for a shard of glass. The sheer monumental stupidity of his choices crashed down on him, and the shame was a physical weight pressing the air from his lungs. Then, just as the first hint of dawn was breaking through the blinds of the hospital window, the world changed. A final desperate push from Chloe, a chorus of encouragement from the nurses, and then a new sound filled the room. A thin, reedy cry, a sound that pierced through the exhaustion and the pain and the regret. It was the sound of a new beginning. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, his voice bright. "You have a beautiful, healthy daughter." They placed the swaddled baby on Chloe's chest. She was a mess of tears and sweat, completely drained, but as she looked down at the tiny, wrinkled creature in her arms, a look of such profound, transcendent love illuminated her face that it took Marcus's breath away. He was looking at a masterpiece, a Madonna and child, a sacred image he had no right to be witnessing. The nurse Mary gently took the baby to be weighed and cleaned. She turned to Marcus, a knowing softness in her eyes. "Would you like to hold your daughter, Dad?" His hands trembled as she placed the impossibly small bundle in his arms. She weighed next to nothing, yet she felt heavier than his entire, collapsing world. He looked down at her face, a perfect miniature nose, a rosebud mouth, a dusting of fine, dark hair. She was real. She was his, and he had almost lost her before he'd even met her. As the baby, his daughter, squirmed in his arms and opened her eyes for the first time, eyes that were the exact piercing blue of her mother's. The last of Marcus Thorne's defenses crumbled into dust. He broke. A deep, silent sob racked his body, and tears he didn't know he was capable of shedding streamed down his face, splashing onto the soft pink blanket of the child he didn't deserve. He was holding his legacy. Not Aura Innovations, not the Omnicorp merger, not the stock portfolio. This perfect, innocent £7 life. This was the only thing that had ever truly mattered, and he had treated her and her mother as a disposable asset. The next 3 days passed in a strange, muted dream state. Marcus never left the hospital. He slept when he slept at all in the hard plastic visitor's chair, waking with a crick in his neck and a hollow ache in his chest. He ate vending machine sandwiches and drank bitter coffee. He existed in a silent, unspoken truce with Chloe. They didn't talk about the lawyers, the indictments, or the future. They spoke only of Olivia. Did she take the bottle? Do you think you could change her? Listen. She's making a little noise. He learned the alien rhythms of a newborn. The startlingly loud sneezes, the tiny grasping fingers that would wrap around his own with surprising strength, the soft, milky scent of her skin. He watched Chloe, her maternal instincts kicking in with a fierce, natural grace. He saw the way she held Olivia, the way she whispered to her, the way her entire being seemed to soften and focus when their daughter was in her arms. He was a spectator to the formation of a family he had been ejected from by his own hand. His phone buzzed incessantly. His lawyers, his panicked board members, his coked-out brother. He would step into the hallway to take the calls, his voice a low, defeated murmur as he listened to the reports of his empire's final sputtering death throes. Then he would hang up, take a deep breath to compose himself, and step back into room 314. Back into the quiet, sacred space where the only thing that mattered was the steady, rhythmic breathing of his sleeping daughter. It was a brutal, relentless cycle of punishment and grace. On the third day, Frank Miller arrived. He was a sturdy, unimposing man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a presence that radiated quiet competence. He greeted Chloe with a warm, paternal smile before his gaze fell on Marcus. The kindness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a flat, cold appraisal. He was a protector, and Marcus was the threat. His arrival was the signal. The truce was over. As Frank helped Chloe pack her few belongings, Marcus stood by the window holding Olivia one last time. He drank in every detail of her face, trying to commit it to memory. "I've spoken to my lawyers," he said, his voice husky, not turning around. "They're structuring a trust. Everything that's left after the government is done with me will go into it. It will be in Olivia's name, irrevocable, untouchable. You and she will be taken care of, for life." Chloe was silent for a moment, folding a small blanket. "I told you, Marcus, I don't want your money." Her voice was soft, but the edge of steel was still there. "It's not my money anymore. It's hers," he replied, finally, turning to face her. "It's the only clean thing I have left to give her. A start, free from me." He looked down at the tiny baby in his arms. "Chloe, will I be able to see her in the future?" "Maybe." The question was a raw plea, stripped of all artifice and pride. Chloe looked at him, her gaze clear and unflinching. She wasn't looking at him with hatred, but with a deep, bottomless sadness. "That will be Olivia's decision to make," she said, her voice even. "When she's old enough to know the whole truth and understand it. You can write to her. I'll keep the letters for her. But you have to earn the right to be her father, Marcus. You need to face what you've done. Pay your debt, not just to the law, but to yourself. You have to become a man that a daughter could one day be proud of. He knew she was right. It was more than he deserved. He nodded slowly, a lump forming in his throat. He walked over to where Chloe stood and gently, reverently placed their daughter into the car seat Frank was holding. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Olivia's forehead, a ghost of a touch. He let his lips linger for a moment, breathing in her scent one last time. He straightened up and looked at Chloe, his eyes conveying a universe of apologies he could never adequately speak. Goodbye, Chloe. Goodbye, Marcus. Then he turned and walked out of the hospital room, out of the maternity ward, out of their lives. He didn't look back. He walked out into the harsh midday sun, toward the waiting storm of federal agents' public disgrace and the long, lonely years of atonement that lay ahead. Chloe watched him go, feeling not a sense of victory, but of profound, somber finality. The great and powerful Marcus Thorne was gone, leaving only a broken man in his place. She turned to Frank, a small, weary smile finally touching her lips. "Let's go home, Frank." "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice full of warmth as he gently lifted the carrier. As they drove away from the hospital, leaving the wreckage of her old life behind, Chloe looked down at Olivia, sleeping peacefully in her seat. The gilded cage was a pile of ashes. The empire had crumbled. But here in this calm, heading towards a small, quiet cottage by a lake, she had everything that had ever truly mattered. She was no longer just a wife, or a victim, or a fugitive. She was a mother. She was a survivor. She was free. She was standing on a new foundation, one she had forged herself out of the fires of betrayal, a foundation built not on wealth or lies, but on courage, truth, and a mother's fierce, unyielding, and unbreakable love. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, it was entirely her own. An incredible story of betrayal resilience and the quiet strength it takes to tear down a corrupt world to build a better one. Chloe Thorne's journey shows us that sometimes the most powerful act isn't to forgive and forget, but to demand accountability. What would you have done in her position? Could you walk away from a life of immense wealth to find a life of true worth? These are the questions that stories like this leave us with. If you were captivated by Chloe's story and want to hear more real-life dramas and tales of incredible twists, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a powerful story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support allows us to keep bringing these compelling narratives to you. Thank you for listening. What happens when the perfect life is built on a perfect lie? For 7 months, Catherine Vance Thorne believed she had it all: a loving husband, a multi-million-dollar empire at their fingertips, and their first child on the way. She pictured a future filled with laughter in their sprawling Manhattan penthouse. But her husband, the charismatic Marcus Thorne, was painting a different picture, one created during clandestine business trips. When a single damning clue sends a 7 months pregnant Catherine on a desperate drive to a secluded Hamptons resort, the masterpiece of deceit Marcus has been crafting is about to be slashed to ribbons. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a saga of high-stakes betrayal, corporate espionage, and a woman who discovers that the greatest power isn't in wealth, but in ruin. Stay with us. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting long, distorted shadows across the Italian marble floors. From this vantage point, 60 stories above Central Park, New York City, looked like a schematic, a perfect grid of ambition and light. Catherine Vance Thorne rested a hand on the gentle, prominent swell of her abdomen, feeling the faint, fluttering kicks of the life within her. At 7 months pregnant, she felt both profoundly powerful and exquisitely vulnerable. The nursery was complete, a serene masterpiece of cream and gentle grey, with a handcrafted mobile of celestial bodies waiting to spin above a crib that had cost more than most people's cars. Everything in her life was curated for perfection, a testament to the combined might of the Vance and Thorne dynasties. Her family, the Vances, were old money, their wealth rooted in shipping and real estate, a quiet, unshakable force in the city's financial landscape. Marcus's fortune was newer, louder, forged in the volatile crucible of hedge funds. He was the brilliant, daring wunderkind, the man who could scent a market shift like a shark smells blood. Their marriage had been the society event of the year, a merger of legacy and audacity. Catherine traced the rim of a crystal glass, the condensation cool against her fingertips. She looked at her husband, who stood with his back to her phone, pressed to his ear. Marcus Thorne was a man sculpted by success. His Savile Row suit draped perfectly over his athletic frame, and his voice, even muffled, was a low, confident baritone that could soothe panicked investors and charm seasoned CEOs. He was her rock, the charismatic architect of their shared future. Or so she believed. "No, absolutely not," he said into the phone, his tone sharp. "The timeline is immutable. We move on the 25th, not a day later. Handle it." He ended the call with a decisive tap and turned a practiced smile, instantly softening the hard lines of his face. "Sorry about that, my love. Incompetence is the one market I can't seem to short." He crossed the vast living room, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush Aubusson rug. He knelt before her, placing a hand over hers on her belly. "And how are my two favorite people in the world doing?" "We're good." Catherine smiled the familiar warmth of his touch, chasing away a flicker of unease. "He's been active today. I think he's going to be a soccer player. Or a CEO who kicks his competitors into submission." Marcus grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He leaned in and kissed her a deep, reassuring kiss that tasted faintly of expensive whiskey and something else she couldn't quite name. A scent. It wasn't his usual cologne Creed Aventus, nor was it her perfume. It was floral and slightly spicy, a woman's scent. She dismissed it. He'd been in meetings all day, surrounded by people. It meant nothing. "Listen." He began settling back on his heels, his expression turning serious. "Something's come up. A big something. You know the tech merger I've been working on? The one in San Francisco?" Catherine nodded. It was all he had talked about for weeks, a complex acquisition that would, in his words, reshape the digital landscape. "Well, the key players have flown in for an unscheduled summit. It's last minute, I know, and I hate it, but I have to fly out tonight. It's only for a couple of days. 3 at the most. It's the final push, Kat. This deal will secure our child's future 10 times over." A knot of disappointment tightened in her chest. "Tonight. But Marcus, my checkup is tomorrow. The big one. We were supposed to hear the heartbeat together again." His face fell with practiced, perfect sympathy. I know, my love. I am so sorry. Believe me, I would rather be here holding your hand than in a sterile boardroom. But this is critical. The timing is everything. He stroked her cheek. I'll be back before you know it, and I promise I will not miss another appointment. I'll make it up to you. A week in Moustique after the baby comes. Just the three of us. The promise of a future luxury was a common balm he applied to present disappointments. It usually worked, but this time the unease lingered. It was the suddenness of it all. Marcus was a meticulous planner. Last-minute chaos wasn't his style. Of course, she said, forcing a smile. I understand. It's for us. Exactly, he said, relief washing over his features. He stood and kissed her forehead. I'll go pack. My flight is in 3 hours. As he walked towards their master suite, Catherine's gaze fell on his briefcase, which he had left by the sofa. A corner of a receipt was peeking out from the side pocket. Normally, she would never have looked. It would have felt like a violation, a crack in the foundation of their trust. But the faint alien scent of perfume, the suddenness of the trip, the slickness of his explanation, it all coalesced into a single sharp point of curiosity. Her heart thumping with a strange mix of guilt and apprehension, she reached out and slowly, carefully pulled the receipt free. It wasn't from a restaurant or a client lunch. It was from La Perle, the lingerie boutique. The date was from that very afternoon. She scanned the items: a silk chemise, an eyelash lace bra, a matching thong. Size small. Catherine was a medium, and with her pregnancy she had been living in comfortable, soft cotton. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, began to seep into her bones. There could be an explanation. A gift for a friend's wife. A present for her, for after the baby. But why hide it? Why wouldn't he have given it to her with a flourish as he usually did? She quickly folded the receipt and slipped it back. Her hands trembling. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm the frantic thrumming of her pulse. She was being paranoid. The stress of the pregnancy was making her imagine things. Marcus loved her. He was building a life for them. He was a good man. He emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later, pulling a sleek Rimowa carry-on. He was already in his travel attire, a comfortable but stylish cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked every bit the global executive on the move. All set, he announced, his voice breezy. The car is waiting downstairs. Now I want you to promise me you'll rest. Don't overdo it. Beatrice is coming over tomorrow to go with you to the doctor, right? Catherine nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Her sister Beatrice had always been more cynical about Marcus, seeing his ambition as a razor's edge that could easily cut both ways. Catherine had always defended him, painting Beatrice's concerns as sisterly overprotection. Now Beatrice's skeptical words echoed in her mind. Good, Marcus said. He pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and secure. It felt like a lie. The whole embrace felt like a hollow performance. I'll call you the moment I land. I love you more than anything. I love you too, she managed to whisper the words, feeling like ash in her mouth. She watched from the window as he got into the black town car, a tiny, insignificant figure 60 floors below. The car didn't turn east towards JFK or LaGuardia. It headed west towards the West Side Highway, towards the Hamptons. The cold dread solidified into a terrifying certainty. The San Francisco Tech Summit was a lie. The lingerie wasn't for her. And her husband was not on a business trip. He was on his way to a rendezvous. Alone in the cavernous silence of their penthouse, surrounded by the hewlant trapping of their perfect life, Catherine Vance Thorne finally allowed the facade to crack. A single hot tear traced a path down her cheek, a silent harbinger of the storm that was about to break. She was not just a wife. She was a Vance, and the Vances did not crumble. They fought back. The question was, how? The initial shock was already hardening into something else, something cold and sharp. A plan began to form in the ruins of her trust, a plan that would take her from her gilded cage and set her on a collision course with the ugly truth. The silence in the penthouse after Marcus left was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. Every ticking clock, every hum from the climate control system seemed to mock Catherine's newfound solitude. She walked through the grand rooms, touching the cold surfaces of their shared life, the polished mahogany of the dining table where they'd hosted glittering dinner parties, the soft leather of the armchair where he read the Wall Street Journal every morning. It all felt like a movie set the backdrop for a story she had mistakenly believed was her own. She sank onto the edge of their vast bed, the La Perla receipt burning a hole in her mind. It was a single piece of evidence, perhaps circumstantial. She needed more. Doubt was a poison, but certainty was a weapon. Her mind raced, sifting through the last few weeks, searching for other inconsistencies she had glossed over. The late-night conference calls, where his voice was hushed the weekends he'd spent at the office, but came home looking relaxed, not tired. The password on his personal laptop, which had always been her birthday, was suddenly changed. At the time, she had chalked it up to his company's new cybersecurity protocols. Now it seemed like a locked door she had never thought to question. The next morning, Beatrice arrived, her sharp eyes immediately registering the tension in Catherine's posture. Beatrice Vance was the opposite of her sister in many ways. Where Catherine was diplomatic and serene, Beatrice was blunt and fiery, her loyalty fierce and her bullshit detector flawless. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Beatrice said, foregoing a hello as she dropped her purse onto a chair. Did the Prince of Wall Street forget to kiss his pregnant princess goodbye? Catherine's composure, so carefully maintained, overnight crumbled. She handed her sister the receipt. Beatrice's eyes narrowed as she read it, her lips tightening into a thin line. Size small. Beatrice said flatly, "Well, that's not for you, is it? Not unless he's planning for 2 years from now. The man is many things, but a forward planner in lingerie is not one of them." She looked up at Catherine, her expression softening from sarcasm to deep concern. "Oh, Kath." What did he say? Through tears she could no longer suppress. Catherine recounted the story, the sudden trip, the San Francisco excuse, the car heading west. The Hamptons, Beatrice breathed, her mind already working. Of course, it's off-season, quiet, exclusive, the perfect place to hide a dirty little secret in plain sight. Marcus has a corporate account at the Seagate. It's one of those ridiculously private resorts where the staff is trained to be blind, deaf, and dumb. Catherine's blood ran cold. The Seagate. Marcus had taken her there for their first anniversary. It was secluded, nestled in a private cove, a haven of understated luxury. The memory was now tainted, corrupted. "I have to know, Bea." Catherine said, her voice gaining a steely edge that surprised even herself. "I can't sit here in this museum of our marriage and wait for him to come home smelling of lies and another woman's perfume. I have to see it for myself." Beatrice studied her sister. The tear-stained face was still there, but beneath it, a new resolve was hardening. This was the Vance bloodline, kicking in the same indomitable will that had allowed their great-grandfather to build a shipping empire from nothing. "Are you sure?" Kath Beatrice asked gently. "You're 7 months pregnant. The stress, the shock." "What's more stressful?" Catherine countered, standing up, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "The agonizing uncertainty, or the cold, hard truth? This isn't just about my feelings anymore. This is about my child. I will not bring my son or daughter into a life built on a foundation of deceit. I need to know what I'm fighting." Beatrice nodded slowly, a grim smile touching her lips. "All right, then let's go to war. But we do it smart. No dramatic phone calls, no hysterics. We gather irrefutable proof. We need more than a receipt for some slutty underwear." The first step was logistics. A trip to the doctor's office was repurposed. While Beatrice waited in the car, Catherine had her appointment. The strong, steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat was a reassurance, a tiny drumbeat of courage. She asked her obstetrician, Dr. Miller, if light travel was permissible. "Everything looks perfect," Catherine Dr. Miller said warmly. "A short car ride, say a couple of hours, is perfectly fine. Just stay hydrated and don't overexert yourself." It was the clearance she needed. The next step was intel. While Catherine was at the doctor's, Beatrice was on the phone calling in a favor from a friend who worked in high-end concierge services. It was a long shot, but the world of the ultra-wealthy was surprisingly small. When Catherine returned to the car, Beatrice was tapping furiously on her phone. "Okay. I think I have something," she said, her voice low and excited. "My friend Jessica owes me one." She pulled some strings. "She can't access the Seagate's official guest list, but she has a source in their spa. Jessica's source confirms a booking was made for this afternoon. A 90-minute couple's deep tissue massage, booked under the name Mr. Thorne. The reservation notes specify 2 therapists, male and female, for Mr. and Mrs. Thorne." The words Mrs. Thorne felt like a physical blow. He was not just with another woman. He was giving her Catherine's title, her identity, in this secret, sordid world he had created. "The appointment is at 4 p.m. Beatrice continued, her voice hardening. "That's in 3 hours. We can make it if we leave now." The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless, but it was the only path forward that felt real. Catherine called the family's trusted driver, a stoic man named Frank, who had been with the Vances for 30 years and knew how to be discreet. She simply told him they needed to go to the Hamptons. He asked no questions. The drive out of the city was a blur. The familiar skyline receded, replaced by the manicured suburbs, and then the long, flat stretch of the Long Island Expressway. Catherine sat in the plush leather seat of the Mercedes, a bottle of water in her hand, her mind a maelstrom of past memories and future fears. She remembered Marcus proposing to her on a wind-swept cliff in Big Sur, telling her that his life had been black and white until she brought the color. Had that been a lie, too? Was he a sociopath, a brilliant actor playing the part of a loving husband? Beatrice, ever the pragmatist, was strategizing. "Okay, when we get there, we can't just storm in. We need to be smart. You are Catherine Vance Thorne. You have every right to be there. We'll go to the front desk. You'll say you're surprising your husband. You'll be charming, poised. They know the Vance name. They won't question you. Ask for a key to his suite. The Oceanfront Villa 7. That's where he is." Beatrice had managed to get the villa number from her source. Villa 7, the most private, most expensive accommodation at the resort, with its own private plunge pool and a terrace that overlooked the desolate beauty of the winter ocean. What if he's not there? What if they're at the spa? Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Then we wait, Beatrice said firmly. We sit in the lobby, we order tea, and we wait for Mr. and Mrs. Thorne to return from their relaxing afternoon. But my gut says they'll be back in the room. People like that, they want to enjoy every overpriced inch of the fantasy they've paid for. As they passed the iconic sign welcoming them to the Hamptons, Catherine felt a shift inside her. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but it was being overlaid by a chilling sense of purpose. She was no longer just the wounded pregnant wife. She was the CEO of this operation, the chief arbiter of her own fate. She smoothed down her dress, took a deep breath, and practiced the serene, confident smile she would need. She was about to step onto the stage of the biggest performance of her life, and she would not miss her cue. The unraveling thread had led her here to the edge of the Atlantic, and she was ready to pull it until the entire tapestry of lies came undone. The Seagate Resort and Spa was designed to look like it had been carved from the very dunes it occupied. Weathered grey cedar, vast expanses of glass and minimalist landscaping created an atmosphere of monastic, wildly expensive tranquility. Even in the stark light of a winter afternoon, it was beautiful. The beauty felt like an insult. Frank pulled the Mercedes S-Class smoothly under the portico. A valet, young and crisp in his uniform, rushed to open the door. Beatrice gave Catherine's hand a final firm squeeze. Showtime. Remember who you are. You own this place and everyone in it. Catherine stepped out of the car, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter around her shoulders. She was the very picture of refined elegance, her pregnancy only adding to her aura of serene maternal grace. No one would guess the tempest raging within her. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet luxury. A massive stone fireplace crackled at one end, and the air smelled of sea salt and burning birchwood. A single receptionist, a woman with impossibly perfect posture, stood behind a monolithic desk of reclaimed wood. Catherine glided towards the desk, Beatrice, a half step behind her, a silent guard. "Good afternoon," Catherine said, her voice smooth as cream. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Marcus Thorne. I believe he's in one of your oceanfront villas." The receptionist, whose name tag read Anja, offered a polite professional smile. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne. It's a pleasure to have you with us. May I see some identification?" Catherine produced her driver's license. Anja's eyes flickered from the ID to Catherine's face, then to the name Thorne. The recognition was instant. Marcus Thorne was a name that commanded respect and discretion. "Everything appears to be in order," Anya said, her smile warming slightly. "Mr. Thorne is checked into Villa 7. I must say it's a wonderful surprise. He mentioned he was here for some intense solitary work. The lie repeated by a stranger was like a fresh stab wound." Solitary work. Catherine's smile didn't waver. "He works far too hard. I decided he needed a distraction. Could I trouble you for a key to the villa? I'd like to be waiting for him when he returns." This was the critical moment. A request for a second key without the primary guest present was a breach of protocol even for a spouse. Anya hesitated, her professional training warring with the desire to please a guest of Catherine's stature. Normally we would need to call the room to get Mr. Thorne's verbal confirmation. She began, her tone apologetic. Catherine leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a confidential, charming whisper. "Anya, I've just driven 2.5 hours from the city. I'm 7 months pregnant, and I'm desperate to see the look on his face when he walks in and finds me there. A phone call would spoil the entire thing. Surely we can keep this our little secret?" She placed a hand on her belly, a gesture that was both authentic and masterfully deployed. The combination of her name, her visible pregnancy, and her conspiratorial charm was too powerful to resist. Anya's professional resolve melted. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne," she said, her smile now genuine. "For you, we can make an exception. Let me program a key for you." As the receptionist worked, Beatrice let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Catherine was magnificent. She was playing the part of the adoring wife so perfectly, it was chilling. Keycard in hand, they walked away from the desk. "Villa 7 is at the far end of the property," Beatrice murmured. "It offers the most privacy." The most privacy to do what Catherine said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. The walk to the villa was the longest of Catherine's life. They followed a winding stone path that meandered through wind-swept seagrass. The air grew colder, sharper, and the sound of the crashing waves became a relentless roar. Each step was a drumbeat towards a detonation. Her earlier calm was evaporating, replaced by a raw, visceral dread. Her palms were sweating. Her heart hammered against her ribs. And then they were there. Villa 7. The name was etched on a simple, elegant plaque next to a heavy wooden door. It looked anonymous, innocuous, but behind it lay the truth. "Kath, are you ready?" Beatrice asked, her voice soft. Catherine looked at the door, then out at the grey, churning ocean. She thought of her unborn child, floating peacefully in its own silent world, oblivious to the tsunami about to hit theirs. That image gave her the final surge of strength she needed. "I am," she said. She turned to her sister. "Wait here. I have to do this alone." Beatrice hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. But she saw the look in Catherine's eyes. It was not a request, but a command. She nodded and stepped back. Catherine took a deep breath, held the keycard to the electronic lock, and waited for the small green light. It flashed. With a soft click, the lock disengaged. She pushed the door open. The villa's entryway led into a spacious living area, impeccably decorated in shades of sand and stone. A bottle of Bollinger champagne sat in a silver bucket on a low table, 2 flutes next to it. One was empty, the other half full, a faint lipstick smear on its rim. A man's jacket, Marcus's, was thrown carelessly over a chair, and from the bedroom just beyond, a partially open door, she could hear voices. A man's low laugh, Marcus's laugh, and a woman's higher, lighter laugh in response. The sound paralyzed her for a second. It was real. This was happening. Moving as if in a dream, she crept across the silent room. Her hand was steady as she pushed the bedroom door fully open. The scene before her was one of lazy post-coital intimacy. The king-sized bed was a tangle of white sheets. Marcus was propped up against the pillows, wearing nothing but a pair of boxer briefs, a tablet resting on his lap. And sitting next to him, her back to the door, was a woman. She was wearing a short, black silk robe, the one from the La Perla bag, Catherine realized with a sickening lurch. Her dark hair was tousled, and she was tracing a pattern on Marcus's chest with her finger. "You're sure no one will find out?" the woman's voice said. It was a voice Catherine vaguely recognized. "Your wife, she's not the suspicious type." Catherine Marcus scoffed, his tone dripping with a casual cruelty that shattered Catherine's heart into a million pieces. She trusts me completely. She thinks I'm in San Francisco saving the world. She's a good woman, but a little naive. It's one of her charms. He was about to say more, but he glanced up, perhaps sensing a change in the light or a sudden chill in the air. His eyes met Catherine's. Time seemed to stop. The color drained from Marcus's face, replaced by a ghastly, mottled white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The tablet slid from his lap and hit the floor with a dull thud. He looked like a man who had just seen his own executioner walk through the door. The woman, sensing his sudden terror, turned around. Her face was a mask of confusion, which then morphed into shocked recognition. Catherine's blood turned to ice. She knew this woman. It was Sloane Davenport, a fiercely ambitious rising star at a rival investment firm, Sterling Nash. She was known for her beauty, her brilliance, and her utter ruthlessness. This wasn't some random, meaningless affair. This was a liaison with a direct professional competitor. Sloane Davenport stared at Catherine, her mouth slightly agape. For a moment, the three of them were frozen in a tableau of shock, betrayal, and discovery. It was Catherine who broke the silence. Her voice was not the shriek of a hysterical wife. It was low, calm, and utterly devastating. It was the voice of ice and steel. "Don't get up on my account," she said, her eyes locked on her husband's. "It seems you're in the middle of some very intense solitary work." She used his own lie as the first twist of the knife. Marcus flinched, as if she had physically struck him. The game was over. The perfect life was a ruin. And Catherine was standing in the rubble, the undisputed, terrifying victor of this first brutal battle. The silence that followed Catherine's words was thick and suffocating. Sloane Davenport, recovering her composure with the speed of a seasoned predator, quickly clutched the silk robe tighter around herself, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. But Marcus remained frozen, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated panic. The cocksure master of the universe was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "Catherine," he finally stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. What are you doing here? You should be in New York. The baby is fine." Catherine cut him off, her tone glacial. "He has a strong heart, unlike his father." She let her gaze drift disdainfully over Sloane, then back to Marcus. "I see the San Francisco Tech Summit was relocated, and that the dress code is more casual than I imagined. Is she part of the acquisition, Marcus, or just a disposable asset?" Each word was a precisely aimed dart. Sloane's face hardened. She stood up, a calculated move to assert some form of control. "I think I should go." "No," Catherine said, her voice dropping even lower, yet carrying an authority that rooted Sloane to the spot. "You stay. You were part of this business meeting. You should see it through to its conclusion." Catherine took a deliberate step into the room, her presence dominating the space. She looked around the suite at the champagne, the tangled sheets, the view of the desolate ocean. "It's a beautiful room. I remember it. We celebrated our first anniversary here. Did you tell her that, or does the personal history of the places you defile not matter?" Marcus finally found his legs, scrambling out of the bed and grabbing for his trousers. "Cat, please. Let's not do this here. Let's go somewhere and talk." "This isn't what it looks like." Catherine let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. "It isn't what it looks like, Marcus. Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you have any idea how insulting that sentence is?" I am standing in a hotel room that you booked under your name, looking at you and your associate from a rival firm half naked in a bed that you paid for. It is exactly what it looks like. The only question is for how long Sloane, seeing an opportunity to sow chaos, spoke up. For about 6 months, she said coolly, looking directly at Catherine. If you're going to have the details, you might as well have them all. It was a cruel, calculated blow designed to shatter Catherine's composure. But Catherine didn't even flinch. She didn't grant Sloane a single glance. Her focus remained entirely on her husband, the true architect of this betrayal. 6 months, Catherine repeated softly, nodding to herself. So this started just after we found out I was pregnant. That's a special kind of cruelty, Marcus. You deserve an award for it. She turned her movement fluid and graceful and walked back towards the door. She did not slam it. She did not run. She simply left, leaving a vacuum of shock and recrimination in her wake. Her retreat was more powerful than any screaming match could ever have been. Beatrice was waiting by the door, her face pale with anxiety. The moment she saw Catherine's expression, a mask of cold, terrifying calm, she knew. "Let's go," Catherine said, her voice flat. They walked back down the winding path, the roar of the ocean now sounding like a symphony of her rage. She remained silent until they were safely inside the climate-controlled silence of the Mercedes pulling away from the resort. Only then did her body begin to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shudder. The adrenaline wore off, and the crushing weight of the betrayal slammed into her. She didn't cry out. The sob was a silent, convulsive thing that racked her entire body. Beatrice wrapped her arms around her, offering what little comfort she could. "He's dead to us," Beatrice whispered fiercely. "He's nothing. We'll call Dad. We'll get the lawyers. We will burn him to the ground." Catherine's trembling slowly subsided, replaced by an icy resolve. "Not yet," she said, her voice raspy. "First, I need to understand everything. This wasn't just a cheap affair, Bea. The woman was Sloane Davenport." Beatrice's eyes widened. "From Sterling Nash? Are you serious? Marcus is in the middle of that hostile takeover bid against them. What the hell is he thinking, sleeping with the enemy?" "I don't know," Catherine said. "But I'm going to find out." They drove back to the city in near silence. When she arrived at the empty penthouse, it felt alien, contaminated. She instructed Frank to take her to her father's residence on the Upper East Side. She couldn't bear to be in the home she had shared with Marcus. Just as she was walking into the grand old-world lobby of her father's building, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. She ignored it. He called again, and again. On the 10th call, a text message appeared. "Cat, I know you hate me. I deserve it. But you have to listen. It is not what you think. Sloane is not my mistress. It's business. I am using her. Call me. It's vital." Catherine stared at the message, her heart pounding. I am using her. It was a desperate, self-serving excuse, a classic narcissist's gambit, reframe the betrayal as a brilliant, albeit ruthless, strategic move. He was trying to appeal to her pragmatism, to the part of her that understood the cutthroat world they lived in. She almost deleted it. But the mention of Sloane's name, the sheer audacity of the claim, planted a seed of doubt. What if in some twisted way he was telling a sliver of the truth? The affair being with a direct business rival was too specific, too reckless to be random. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "She's been feeding me inside information on Sterling Nash. their defense strategy, their key shareholder weaknesses. This whole thing was a honey trap, but I was the one setting it. It was for the deal. For us. Please, Kat. I can explain. This was the twist. The sudden, nauseating turn. He was admitting to a different kind of crime. Not just adultery, but a deeply unethical, potentially illegal act of corporate espionage. He wasn't asking for forgiveness for the affair. He was trying to rebrand it as a sacrifice for their financial gain. He was trying to make her an accomplice. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless. Her husband was not just a cheat. He was a fool, playing a dangerous game, or a monster trying to justify his actions with greed. The line between personal betrayal and professional conspiracy had just been irrevocably blurred. She stood in the marble foyer of her father's building, the phone heavy in her hand. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. This was no longer just a divorce. It was a war on two fronts. And Marcus, in his desperation, had just handed her a new and powerful weapon, the knowledge of his methods. He thought he was explaining his way out of trouble. He had no idea he was giving her the ammunition she would need to ensure his complete and utter destruction. Alistair Vance's apartment was the antithesis of the sleek, modern penthouse Catherine shared with Marcus. It was a fortress of old money, filled with dark wood, ancestral portraits, and the comforting scent of leather and aged paper. It was a space that radiated permanence and power. Alistair himself was cut from the same cloth. At 65, he was tall and silver-haired, with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He was a man who had weathered market crashes, hostile takeovers, and personal tragedies with the same stoic, unshakable resolve. When Catherine, flanked by a grim-faced Beatrice, told him the story, he listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask. He didn't rage. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply absorbed the information, his mind processing it, like a complex balance sheet. When she finished showing him the text messages from Marcus, he was silent for a full minute, his steepled fingers resting against his lips. "The man is a fool," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "But a dangerous one. To attempt to justify infidelity as a business strategy. It's a level of moral bankruptcy that is frankly impressive." "He thinks it will work," Catherine said, her voice hollow. "He thinks I'm so invested in our wealth that I'll forgive the method. He's appealing to my avarice." "He is appealing to what he knows best," Alistair corrected gently. "He judges you by his own debased standards. He has profoundly underestimated you. That will be his undoing." He stood and walked to the vast window overlooking the city. "This is no longer a simple matter for a divorce attorney, Catherine. He has confessed in writing to corporate espionage. He has implicated himself in a plot that could not only destroy him, but also create significant blowback for our family, should it be handled incorrectly." "What do we do?" Beatrice asked, leaning forward. "We have him. Let's just release this to the board of his company." "Let's expose him." "No," Alistair said, turning from the window. "A public explosion is messy. It creates unpredictable shrapnel. We do not move until we control the entire board. We need to be surgical. First, we operate on the assumption that Marcus is lying, that this "I was using her" narrative is a fabrication to save his skin. But we also operate on the assumption that he might be telling the truth, which is in many ways worse. A man who would use an affair as a business tool is capable of any betrayal. Over the next 48 hours, the Vance residence became a war room. Alistair pulled in his top legal counsel and a private investigator, a former Mossad agent named Kobe, who specialized in discreet, high-stakes corporate intelligence. Catherine was not a passive participant. The shock had transformed into a cold, diamond-hard fury. She was an active strategist, her mind honed by a lifetime of observing her father proving to be sharp and ruthless. She provided Kobe with every detail she could remember about Marcus's recent behavior, names he had mentioned, trips he had taken, the new secretive patterns of his work. She gave him the login details to their shared cloud storage family accounts, anything that might hold a clue. Marcus believes his greatest weapon is his intelligence, Catherine told the team, her voice steady. His real weakness is his ego. He believes he is infallible, that he is the smartest man in any room. That's the vulnerability we will exploit. While Kobe began his digital deep dive, Catherine made a call. She dialed Gregory Shaw, Marcus's partner, and the COO of Thorn Capital. Gregory was the cautious, steady hand to Marcus's daring, often reckless genius. He was a numbers man, a risk analyst who had on more than one occasion privately expressed his concerns to Catherine about Marcus's aggressive strategies. Gregory. "It's Catherine Thorn," she said, her voice calm and professional when he answered. "I need to speak with you urgently, in person and off the record. It concerns a significant undisclosed liability to the firm." The gravity in her tone was unmistakable. They agreed to meet the next morning at a quiet cafe far from the financial district. Meanwhile, Kobe hit pay dirt. Buried deep in a nested folder in a shared family cloud account, a folder labeled Vacation Plans that Catherine had forgotten existed, he found Marcus's digital treasure trove. It was a series of encrypted files. But Marcus, in his arrogance, had used a password related to a personal milestone. Kobe's team easily cross-referenced the stock ticker of the first company he had bankrupted. Inside were Marcus's notes on the Sterling Nash takeover, and it confirmed his text messages. He was using Sloan. The files contained detailed summaries of their meetings, listing information she had supposedly provided about Sterling Nash's defense strategies, their board's divisions, their largest institutional shareholders' pressure points. Marcus had meticulously documented his own conspiracy. He saw it as a record of his brilliance. Catherine saw it as a signed confession. But as Kobe dug deeper, another layer emerged. He cross-referenced the intel Sloan had supposedly provided with real-time market data and Sterling Nash's public filings, and he found a discrepancy, a terrifying one. He called Alistair and Catherine into the study. "There is a problem," he said, his Israeli accent precise. "The information from the woman Sloan is not entirely accurate. Some of it is good, just enough to build trust. But the most critical data points, the ones about shareholder positions and their debt covenants, they are subtly wrong. They are not mistakes. They are traps." A hush fell over the room. "Explain," Alistair commanded. "The data Sloan has given him," Kobe continued, pointing to his screen, "is designed to encourage Thorn Capital to launch its takeover bid at a specific price point, targeting specific shareholders. But according to our real analysis, this strategy will fail. It will trigger a poison pill defense we've uncovered in Sterling Nash's corporate bylaws that is far more potent than the one she described. It wouldn't just block the takeover. The blowback would leave Thorn Capital dangerously over-leveraged and vulnerable. The stock would plummet." Catherine felt a chill crawl up her spine. The second twist. The real twist. So she wasn't the honey trap, Catherine breathed. He was. She was playing him from the very beginning. Sloan Davenport wasn't a source. She was an assassin. She was feeding Marcus carefully crafted misinformation, leading him and his company towards a cliff, all while stroking his ego and letting him believe he was the master manipulator. She wasn't just sleeping with the enemy. She was gutting him from the inside out, using his own arrogance as her weapon. Alistair Vance allowed a slow, grim smile to spread across his face. "My God," he whispered. "It's brilliant. Utterly ruthless, but brilliant." He looked at his daughter, and his eyes were filled with a new kind of respect. "He handed you the gun to shoot him, and you've just discovered it's a cannon." Catherine now held all the cards. She had proof of Marcus's infidelity. She had his written confession of unethical corporate espionage. And now she had proof that his grand strategy was a catastrophic failure in the making a trap set by the very woman he thought he was controlling. She could not only destroy her husband personally, but could also save his company from his folly, positioning herself as the key player who uncovered the entire conspiracy. The next morning, when she walked into the cafe to meet Gregory Shaw, she was no longer just Catherine Thorne, the wronged wife. She was Catherine Vance, the inheritor of her father's strategic mind and ruthless execution. She was calm, prepared, and ready to make her first move in a game Marcus didn't even know she was playing. The power play had begun. The cafe was a discreet, anonymous place in Tribeca, the kind of establishment where powerful people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Gregory Shaw was already there, nursing an espresso, his face etched with worry. He was a man who lived by numbers and data, and the cryptic nature of Catherine's call had clearly unsettled him. "Catherine," he said, rising as she approached. "Thank you for meeting me. Is everything all right? You mentioned a liability." "Hello, Gregory," she said, her voice even. She didn't sit down immediately. "The liability isn't a what, it's a who. It's Marcus." Gregory's expression tightened. "I don't follow. Is this about the Sterling Nash deal?" "I'll admit his strategy is more aggressive than I'd like, but his projections are solid. His projections," Catherine said, finally taking a seat, "are based on a fantasy. A fantasy fed to him by his mistress, Sloane Davenport." The name landed on the table between them with the force of a physical object. Gregory visibly paled. Sloane Davenport. From Sterling Nash. That's impossible. It's professional suicide. For Marcus, yes." Catherine agreed. For her, it's the coup of a lifetime. For the next 20 minutes, Catherine laid it all out. She didn't speak with the emotion of a betrayed wife, but with the cold precision of a CEO delivering a devastating report. She told him about the affair, showing him a single damning piece of evidence on her phone, a time-stamped photo she had instructed Kobe to retrieve from the Seagate security footage, showing Marcus and Sloane entering the elevator together. Then she moved to the business. She explained the honey trap, the manipulated data, the poison pill. She detailed how Sloane was leading Marcus, and by extension the entire firm, into a perfectly designed ambush that would cripple them. She didn't show him Marcus's confessional notes. That was her trump card to be held in reserve. She presented only the hard data. Kobe had compiled the analysis that proved Sloane's information was a lie. Gregory listened, his initial shock turning to dawning horror, and then to cold fury. He was a man who had dedicated his life to building Thorne Capital alongside Marcus, mitigating his partner's risks. To learn that Marcus had exposed them all, not just through recklessness, but through a toxic cocktail of arrogance and infidelity, was the ultimate betrayal. The man is a pyromaniac who thinks he can control fire. Gregory said, his voice shaking with rage. He's going to burn the entire firm to the ground for an ego trip. Yes, Catherine said simply. Unless we stop him. The board meeting to approve the final phase of the takeover is on Friday. We have 2 days. What do you want? Gregory asked, his eyes locking on hers. He was seeing her now not as the boss's wife, but as a player. A formidable one. I want what you want, Gregory. To protect the firm. To excise the cancer. I want you to rally the board members you trust. My father is already making calls to the institutional investors his family has relationships with. When Marcus walks into that boardroom on Friday, he will not be met with applause. He will be met with a unified front. And you? Gregory asked. What is your price? My price, Catherine said. Her voice dropping is his complete removal from the company he founded. His shares will be bought out at a valuation that reflects the damage he has caused. And my divorce will be quiet, swift, and uncontested. He will walk away with enough to live on, but he will be stripped of his power, his reputation, and his legacy. He will be a ghost on Wall Street. It was a ruthless, elegant, and total victory she was outlining. Gregory stared at her for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. Friday. We'll be ready. The next 2 days were a blur of encrypted calls, discreet meetings, and strategic maneuvers. Alistair Vance worked his magic behind the scenes, his influence turning the tide of investor sentiment. Gregory Shaw, armed with Catherine's irrefutable proof of the flawed data, secured the loyalty of the other board members. They were all sharks, and they could smell the blood in the water, Marcus's blood. On Friday morning, Marcus Thorne walked into the boardroom on the 50th floor of the Thorne Capitol building, feeling triumphant. He believed he was on the verge of the greatest victory of his career. He had tried calling Catherine dozens of times, but she hadn't answered. He assumed she was angry, hysterical, but would eventually come around once she saw the billions his brilliant, if unorthodox methods had secured for their family. He smiled as he took his seat at the head of the long, polished table. Good morning, everyone. A historic day. No one smiled back. The atmosphere in the room was arctic. Gregory Shaw sat to his right, his face like stone. The other board members stared at him with cold, appraising eyes. Before we begin, Marcus Gregory said, his voice dangerously calm, we have another matter to discuss. An independent risk assessment of the Sterling Nash data has revealed some alarming inconsistencies. Marcus's smile faltered. What are you talking about? My source is ironclad. Is your source Sloane Davenport? Gregory asked flatly. The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked around the room at the hostile faces and realized too late that this was not a meeting. It was an ambush, an execution. And then the boardroom doors opened. Catherine walked in. She was flanked by her father and 2 lawyers. She was composed, powerful, her pregnancy a symbol not of vulnerability, but of the future, a future that would not include him. She took a seat at the opposite end of the table, directly in his line of sight. Catherine, he choked out. What is this? This, Marcus, she said. Her voice, ringing with clarity in the silent room, is called due diligence. Something you abandoned 6 months ago. One of her lawyers slid a folder down the table to him. It contained the photo from the hotel, the analysis of Sloane's flawed data. and on top printouts of his own text messages to Catherine. His own words condemning him. "I am using her." He stared at the documents, his empire crumbling before his eyes. He had been outmaneuvered, out-thought, and utterly destroyed. "The board has held an emergency session," Gregory announced into the void. "We have voted unanimously. We are tabling the Sterling Nash bid indefinitely pending an internal investigation into your conduct, and we are asking for your immediate resignation as CEO and chairman." Marcus looked from the board members to Alistair Vance, whose expression was one of cool satisfaction. Then his gaze fell on his wife. Her face held no pity, no lingering affection. It held only the serene calm of a victor. He was finished. He knew it. Sloane Davenport's scheme had been exposed, but not by him. His affair had been uncovered. His professional judgment was shattered. He had lost everything, all because he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the woman who carried his child. Catherine stood up, her part in the proceedings complete. She didn't need to say another word. As she walked out of the boardroom, she didn't look back. She was walking towards her new life, one she would forge herself from the ashes of her husband's ruin. She was no longer just a Vance by name. She had become the embodiment of its power. Her child would be born into a legacy not of lies, but of strength secured by a mother who had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged the queen of the board. In the end, it wasn't the affair that brought down Marcus Thorne's empire. It was his hubris. He believed he could compartmentalize his life, keeping his betrayals neatly separated from his business. But lies are never contained. They bleed. They infect everything they touch. Catherine's journey from a trusting pregnant wife to a cold, calculating strategist shows us that the deepest wounds can forge the strongest armor. She didn't just survive. She conquered. By refusing to be a victim, she rewrote her own story and the future of everyone around her. What do you think? Was Catherine's revenge justified, or was it too ruthless? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama, betrayal, and ultimate empowerment captivated you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good tale of poetic justice, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger and more compelling than fiction. Thank you for listening.